It's your host with the most without the Holy Ghost. It's Ninamos. Oh boy, this argument. They just keep taking it around like they're sexy, new theistic argument for the existence of God, pony. And we've got to talk about it because that's what we do here. We talk about good old Cameron Bertuzzi and bad arguments to believe in Jesus. So let's watch a little video and use our brains and our big boy pants and our acceptance of what we actually observe to talk about it. Here we go. Oh yes, Fenton. I was in the live chat for this one and it was a good time. I had fun. I was waiting for Slam to just ban me from asking questions. All right, so I want to try and do a live charitable listen with my animated avatar here and you guys in the chat and my community. I'm so grateful for everyone. I do want to mention the poll that I put up early on in the week about, what belief system to you is most logically coherent or tenable or has appeal or sway to you. It's not that I'm considering becoming a Christian. I was looking at Church of Entropy talking in T-Jump's chat and thinking more about what she had to say about consciousness and the hard problem of consciousness and things like that. And so thinking about consciousness and the God concepts was fascinating to me when I don't have to put it to particulars of scripture. And so I wanted just general feedback of the community that watches me and engages my content and sees my posts to hopefully comment more, but also just put their votes in, right? I did get a few Christians that wanted to say, yeah, Christianity is the most obvious and tenable view. I expected that. So, all right. That's why the poll was there. I'm not particularly convinced of just agnostic deism or anything like that. But thinking about consciousness as some kind of fundamental or irreducible property is interesting. So anyway, we're going to talk about psychophysical harmony now and rewatch some of the stream, and we'll see how much we get through before I just flip over my table or I can't be charitable anymore. So here we go.
Yeah, I almost like that term better as for someone who's just kind of getting into the argument is like a mind matter argument, because mind matter harmony. That might be a little bit less daunting of a term for someone, but hopefully
that might be preferable for more popular presentations. Yeah, so the very general basic idea is mind and matter are linked together in very fortunate ways that seem to cry out for explanation. And we think that theism, or at least something like theism, provides a natural explanation.
Okay. Very fortunate ways. Fortunate according to what? Fortunate is a value assessment against particulars of agents or goals, right? So let's think about this. If the mind and matter have a union that is particularly fortunate, who is making that value distinction? Yeah, right? Is it humans? Is it aliens? Is it angels? Is it demons? Is it Satan? Seriously, think about it. To whom is it fortunate? And I agree with Fenton. observer selection bias is at play here. But who are we to say that our assertions or our perceptions are fortunate at all? In fact, under Christian theism, most humans who sin and disobey God have mind matter experiences that are unfortunate, that God would ultimately not desire them to have. So if psychophysical harmony is true, then God has created, or theism, let's just go with theism, right? Let's try and be as charitable as possible. Theism explains a phenomenon that results in a mind matter union that sends most people to hell. You want to worship and love and serve a God that purposefully, in that theistic paradigm, sends most people to hell. Okay, cool.
Perfect. Okay, now take us into the next step of the argument, because really crucial to understanding this argument is the way in which mind and matter are harmonious. And if you can really grasp that, then you can, I think, feel or sense it, or just, obviously just kind of recognize the strength of the argument and why it's actually really powerful. So yeah, take us into the next step. How can we, like, what's a good example of harmony?
Good. So before we look at specific examples of harmony, I think it might be helpful to work under a couple different a couple assumptions about the nature of consciousness, just because those assumptions, when in place, make the puzzle especially vivid. So the way we set out the puzzle in the paper is we start with two assumptions.
Oh boy, here we go.
One is called dualism, the other is the causal closure of the physical. So dualism is just the view that experiences, by which I just mean kind of states of consciousness, that experiences are distinct from any physical states. So your
experiences are distinct from physical states. Now, as a Christian, you have to grant that experiences are indeed independent of physical states, because there is a sleight of hand happening when they talk about psychophysical harmony. The sleight of hand is that the definition of physical or matter will change based on the agent that you're talking about that is having an experience. Okay, so let's give a Christian worldview example. Do demons have experiences? Well, if you take the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke as historical truth, then they certainly do. Demons don't want to do X or Y things, right? They don't want to be hurt by Jesus. Instead, they would rather go into pigs and die a violent death by drowning, apparently. So the Bible accounts for a moral agent, a demon, a fallen angel, whatever, having an experience apart from the physical, right? They have a desire that exists apart from the physical. So they are dualists, but they don't have brain states or neurological fibers, right? And someone in the live chat was like, well, the Bible doesn't say that demons are non-physical. All right, so I challenge every Christian who watches my channel to make the case that demons are physical in the sense that most rational people believe is the definition of the word physical, i.e., a part of this material universe subject to testing, investigation, reproducible, embodied in some sense in our lived experience. If any Christian agrees to produce results like that demons are indeed physical, I will go back to this guy and say, yo, dog, you were right. You were right. Demons are physical. Biblical demons have neural substrates and uh, a phenomenology that is not just a Gundam suit pilot or a Power Rangers in the Megazord or a mind plugged into a matrix. No. They have some actual material that we can look at. I challenge any Christian to come in here and declare, by Jove, demons are physical. What the hell, man? No. You would never do that. So, in what sense do these moral agents that have experiences require psychophysical harmony? Zero. No sense. The same would go for angels. The same would go for God himself. Right? Would you say God is embodied? That God the Father, I guess. And then Trinitarian Christians could respond to me, well, yes, God is embodied through Jesus. He has psychophysical harmony through the Son. Yeah, but that's not until the actual incarnation, right? So the Godhead overall, if it itself can grief, regret, frustration, love, compassion without embodiment, why do we need it? Why do we need psychophysical harmony? God could just create beings that don't have to have any kind of matter essence, matter stuff to have what they could ascertain as an experience, right?
Your feeling of pain or your sensation of red, that's not one and the same thing as a pattern of neurons firing in your brain. It's not one and the same thing as the fact that you behave in certain ways. So there's a distinctness claim that states of consciousness are distinct from physical states.
If states of consciousness are distinct from physical states, then the body doesn't matter. It's redundant. So psychophysical harmony is just a theistic mess, right? It's an extra step. It's experience with another layer for whatever reason.
And we add to that, what dualists standardly do, that there's a not a metaphysically necessary relationship between the physical truths and the truths about experience. So every dualist knows that there's systematic correlations between certain kinds of brain activity and certain kinds of experiences. But according to the dualist, that's not because this pattern of brain activity is identical with this subjective experience. Rather, what's going on is there are laws of nature that, in principle, science could discover. There are laws of nature connecting states, physical states of matter, like the physical states of your brain, to states of consciousness. So you can think of these laws of nature. This is what philosophers call psychophysical laws. You can think of these.
Okay, now this is the creme de la creme. This is where I think this all can fall apart, because I am of the impression and opinion that you could actually recreate the neurochemical and physiological brain state in both a toddler and an adult, but yet register somehow objectively different experiences. So their current psychology, their conscious perceptions of that brain state are going to be different based on their background knowledge, based on the previous interactions that they've had with the real world, and it's inescapable. And the reason I think this is because of a very distinct set that is never talked about by apologetics or proponents of this ridiculous argument: disgust and shame. Because you see, disgust and shame neurological responses look almost identical, and aversion responses look identical in brain scans. Phenomenologically, you can induce such states with the right chemical influences or social stimuli. And so if I behold upon my eye two women kissing, I don't experience shame or disgust. In fact, I experience something else. But some people experience the opposite. They experience that shame and disgust. But maybe given background knowledge or neurochemical relations, they would also experience what Nitty does, or vice versa, right? But apologists don't like to play in this part of the ballgame, because then when it's disgusting for a woman to be without her hijab, but it's beautiful to you that she does not have her hijab, or vice versa, right? It's disgusting to you that she has the hijab, right? We've got now this: who is the disharmonious one under theism? Who is experiencing the wrong brain state? The one that we would say objectively, undeniably, is the harmonious one and the disharmonious one. But apologists will never fess up to this. You can watch this entire stream with me, and what you're going to notice is that they're only going to pull examples of pain and pleasure. They're not going to get into shame, disgust, moral acceptance, compassion, anger, irritation, patience levels, none of that stuff. Because if there are indeed psychophysical laws or laws of nature or whatever that correspond to those things, guess what? Between actual people, you cannot make them one for one indelible or completely objective. It's just not possible. Anyway, here we go. Let's watch some more of this.
These laws of nature as just giving you a mapping from physical states of matter onto subjective experiences. So they'll say that if a physical system like your brain has such and such physical state, like such and such pattern of neurons firing, then it's associated with a subjective feeling of pain. And if it has this other physical state, then it's associated with a subjective sensation of redness, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a kind
Oh yeah, or they pull out the age-old redness. So it's pain, pleasure, and redness for some reason. Like they like to play on colors, right? However, even the redness example seems to fail because the person who has never had the right rods and cones in their fucking eyeballs to see to receive the wavelengths of red, you could fire neurons day in and day out to register the experience of redness for them, but they will not be able to self-report that that is indeed redness, as would someone with the right rods and cones to receive what red is. And yes, Jason, you could teach them what redness is, but I'm trying to think about a uh, propositionally or hypothetically existent brain or agent that doesn't have that phenomenology before then.
kind of, you can think of these laws as just giving you a mapping from physical states of matter onto experiential states of consciousness. Okay, so that's what psychophysical laws are. And dualists think that the psychophysical
Mostly made up. And one of the things I find hilarious about this argument is that it's only perpetrated by people who are, one, on YouTube, two, are in the upper echelons of society, and three, are all in general moral agreement about what things constitute worthy of shame, blame, guilt, compassion, yada yada, etc., and pain and pleasure. It's not. This is not an argument that you're going to see on a Muslim channel. This is not an argument that the mentally struggling are going to talk about, and it's not an argument that you're going to see in outside of those who have ever been to a university.
physical laws are metaphysically contingent. So there's no kind of logical or absolute necessity to the actual correlations between physical states and states of experience. There's all sorts of other metaphysically possible mappings that could have obtained. So, for example, dualists will typically think there's a possible world that has the null mapping, namely, it doesn't map any physical states onto any experiences. So this would be a zombie world. That's a world that's physically exact.
Isn't that hell? Isn't that heaven? Oh, sorry. I guess like some Christians are smart enough to know that a new heavens and new earth is technically physical.
Exactly
Wait,
like
but isn't that heaven now? If you believe in the idea of praying to the saints, that there is a world that exists where saintly beings or ascended former humans that were embodied don't have any uh, correspondence to matter or energy as we understand it. So again, the Christian worldview or the theist who has a big hard on for this argument, if they accept what their Bible says, then their bodies are redundant. This is all just a game. God didn't need to do any of this. The best I could do is wiggle my hand around and make it look suggestive. Oh, no way, Leo. Leo, welcome, welcome, welcome. Leo, do you want to come on and critique this with me? Because I'll let you on. We can hang. But yeah, I would totally love it if my avatar could pop tabs with me.
Like our world, but no one is conscious. No one has any first person experience. There's no subjective aspect to reality. There's just the objective physical aspects of reality. Dualists will also typically think that there are possible psychophysical laws that are spectrum inverted relative to our world. So in the sorts of physical circumstances where I would have a reddish experience, my counterpart in this other world has a greenish experience, and vice versa. So we get a kind of qualia inversion when it comes to subjective color qualia. There's also, they're also typically going to accept that there's all sorts of other kind of much weirder psychophysical mappings that could have obtained. There's no metaphysical impossibility to them obtaining. So there's some psychophysical mappings where only elementary particles get to have subjective experience, and all macroscopic physical systems are not associated with subjective experience. And there's some possible mappings that would just give every physical state the kind of like a random chaotic TV static like experience. So the key point here is there's all these kind of conceivable mappings.
Is anyone tracking this? I kind of am. Okay.
From physical states onto states of experience. And the kind of dualism that we have in mind here just says that every one of these conceivable mappings is, in some sense, logically possible or metaphysically possible.
So, okay. So you get, well, this is another frustrating thing about this argument, is that basically whatever phenomenological or physical state that you say maps to a reported experience can be put in as evidence that it's okay, Leo, can be put in as evidence as a proof or a confirmation of this theory, right? I don't think that this argument has a like falsifiability criteria, because the theist could just say, well, that's just, our current mapping state. This is all we have. This is our sample size. So here you go. Right? So if it accounts for everything, it basically accounts for nothing. There's nothing to compare this to. Or like, if there is, in the Christian worldview, it's just completely disembodied experiences. Whoops. Where again, it's redundant.
So that's the dualist assumption. By the way, these two assumptions, ultimately, we want to show that neither assumption is required in order to get the problem off the ground, but they're just useful to make the puzzle especially vivid to begin with. So dualism, that's the first assumption. The second assumption, as I said, is the causal closure of the physical. And this is just the assumption that the physical events involved in your physical behavior and brain processing have exclusively physical causes. So if you want to causally explain why I behave in a certain way, you never need to reach outside the physical domain. You can always give a
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. If there are purely physical ways to influence the mind or generate experiences, then what does that make of free will? If I can chemically induce someone to lose their inhibitions, you know, by force or by accident, or, make them take a truth-telling serum or something like that, then are they really free? are they really both some mind essence and some physical materials? Well, shouldn't that darn mind have the ability to choose otherwise? Ah, crap.
Complete causal explanation of that in terms of prior physical events, prior events going on within the purely material aspect of reality. Okay, so taken together, those two assumptions amount to a view that philosophers call epiphenomenalist dualism. So this view says that physical activity in the brain causally generates states of experience, but experience doesn't exert any top-down causal influence on the physical processing in your brain or on your behavior or anything else. Rather, experience is something like a byproduct or an epiphenomenon of the physical activity in your brain. It doesn't actually.
Okay, so experience is a byproduct or epiphenomenon of the activity going on in your brain. He says that everything is an acid trip. Well, that's exactly why I'm my animated avatar and I've got these acid balls smashing together behind me. So there you go, Chris. Okay, so her brain said no, but her mind said okay. Oy! Jason. Oh my God. But watch YouTube sober? I sure as hell hope not. Michael, not if I can help it. Good. Good. So, okay. What was I trying to say here? Let's go back.
Physical activity in the brain causally generates states of experience, but experience doesn't exert any top-down causal influence on the physical processing in your brain or on your behavior or anything else. Rather, experience is something like a byproduct or an epiphenomenon of the physical activity in your brain. It doesn't actually causally steer your behavior in any particular way. So this is a version of dualism that has been attractive to many naturalistically inclined dualist philosophers. So David Chalmers, who's probably the single most influential philosopher of mind working today, he defended a view like this in his book, The Conscious Mind, which in my view is the best work of philosophy of mind written in the last 50 years or so.
I can somewhat get on board with this. But I guess, like, if I were to try to be a Christian defending, it's just odd to me that a Christian would bother defending epiphenomenalism, because I think, what is the difference for the Bible believing Christian between a mental state and a what's the word, agency state, or like moral distinctive choice state? Like how do we define that for accounting things like sin or righteous actions? Wouldn't those require or obedient or subservient uh states? I'm really struggling to figure out how a Bible believing moral agent believing Christian would differentiate those two things. Like, seriously, what constitutes the difference between the mental state of I want to take this object from someone and the moral or sin or agency state of I want to take this object from someone? Now, the Christian or Bible believer, I think, has to go a step beyond epiphenomenalism and say that the soul or the intentional state is initiating the is initiating or influencing the physical materials to create the action of stealing, to create the actions of rape, pride, or what have you, right? Like, not all mental states are specifically intentional. Well, I agree with that from a uh materialist perspective, like, right, like, because of the autonomic system, right? There's things happening in my neurology to cause me to breathe, but I'm not directly conscious or intending to breathe. But I'm trying to figure out how that differentiation gets made in relationship to this argument. I agree with you, Fenton. I think consciousness is trying to make a clear story so that we can have continually surviving actions, but not necessarily uh, some kind of internal being or force within us influencing those physical materials.
Or so. Frank Jackson, another influential philosopher of mind, he defended this kind of epiphenomenalist dualist view in a famous paper called Epiphenomenal Qualia. Thomas Huxley, going further back, defended a view like this. So a lot of kind of naturalistically inclined dualist philosophers are inclined to accept this specific kind of epiphenomenalist brand of dualism. Okay, so those are the two assumptions, and then from here I can set out the basic puzzle of psychophysical harmony. So,
but I think most of the people in chat, right, even in this chat, would agree with me that a lot of Christians, for their lay understanding of the interaction of soul, spirit, mind, body, grant or respect or entreat the idea that their moral essence, their soul being, motivates their body to well, sometimes when that soul essence wants to obey God, it does. And when it wants to disobey God, it does not. And then it manifests through their body. Wouldn't, like, if I presented the sophisticated idea of psychophysical harmony to the Apostle Paul, I think his response to me would be like, no, 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 no. This whole brain stuff, you crack open my skull, you look at my bleeding and, busted up body. No, no, no. None of that is responsible for my moral actions. It's the sin nature, this non physical or non material being within me that is driving my actions of disobedience to God. So, right? Like, I don't think that Paul would be a fan, the Apostle Paul would be a fan of modern Christians touting this argument. That you want to have God responsible for the physical materials that have mappings to sin states, to unrighteous behavior. In fact, I think he would be against this argument. He would think this is some kind of Gnostic philosophy, that the body is just as strong as the moral essence or soul of the being of a person. Right? Am I wrong? Is it just me, or what are the other very interesting things about this video, by the way? Let's make it the focus of the where's the view I'm looking for? Yeah, so look at this. It's got out of all of Capturing Christianity's views and channel subscribers, he's got 164,000 subscribers. But this live stream about psychophysical harmony is one of the least viewed streams, least interacted with live chats, and lowest attendance of a live chat I have ever seen. When he converted to Catholicism, his live chat was like 700 people. When he did this hour-long stream on psychophysical harmony, it never got over 50. And how many views a couple days later does this, yet a day later, does this stream have? 1.6K. Less than 8%, less than 0.8% of his subscribership. So to me, it looks like most Christians have no use for this argument. Not only because does it mess with their heads, but it really does seem to fly in the face of most assumptions that they make about the soul or moral agency that they don't agree with. Yeah, I saw multiple people say, I quit, my brain hurts. Yeah, and when you think about like the average IQ of people around the world, plus whoever is subscribed to Captured Christianity and actually trying to engage with the live chat, it would be phenomenally low that people want to engage with this argument and try and adopt it themselves or fully comprehend it. Let's see, what is this? Usually theists don't, because being self shatters the cognitive dissonance of the matrix, and they retreat inward or sit on the edge of the abyss and are forced to take on accountability. Yeah, it's kind of like, I'm wondering, is that in response to the idea that there's some I think that's when they would just say, oh, I've got this icky sin nature that just takes agency randomly, that I don't want to own up to or face the consequences of. So here you go. It's my sin nature that did that, and I don't like it, and neither do you. So here we are. I can agree with that. All right, more video.
So,
Yeah.
psychophysical harmony, first of all, what it is just any case where experiences are correlated with physical states or with other experiences in strikingly fortunate ways that seem lucky or to seem to cry out for explanation. So probably
Ways that seem lucky. Like I said at the beginning, lucky to who? Right? Lucky with respect to whose goals, to whose value assertions. Because again, on Christianity, most people's lived experiences are resulting in their eternal damnation. Most people's phenomena or experiences are leading them away from the true truth in Jesus Christ. So if this argument works, it works to send the most possible people to hell.
probably the most straightforward cases involve affective experience, like pleasure in pain. So, we sometimes feel pain. Pain has a certain normative character to it.
Pain, pleasure, and red, the three favorite examples of this stream.
It's got what we call a normative role. Namely, pain is objectively bad. It gives the subject reason to avoid it and to eliminate it.
Bad according to who?
And sure enough, pain is associated with behavior and dispositions to behave in ways that harmoniously align with the normative role of pain. So,
the normative role of pain. So there are human experiences, by the way, which guarantee you pain, and you know it, but you do them anyway. I am scheduling a vasectomy, and that's going to issue some pain in my life. I'll tell you. No, but seriously, biological females that have a uterus and want to get pregnant know that they will experience the pain of childbirth, but they choose it anyway because they know that they need to endure that to have more children, to continue the species.
Descriptively speaking, pain typically goes with avoidance behavior and withdrawal from the pain-causing
Typically,
stimulus, and the very sorts of behaviors that tend to eliminate and reduce pain. So the actual descriptive role of pain, the kinds of behaviors that in actual fact it's associated with, very much align with the normative role of pain. That is, the behaviors that it gives us reason to perform.
Okay, so here's the interesting thing about the Christian worldview. If you adopt the Bible and the New Testament as an accurate account of church history of the first and second centuries, you're going to say that the earliest Christians are actively engaging behaviors that are going to induce more pain to their life, and they respond to it how? Read Acts chapters 3 through 5. What do the first apostles do, and how do they respond to receiving pain or persecution? Or the account of Stephen in Acts chapter 7 and 8. What does he do in response to pain? This is the best thing that could have ever happened. I'm going to heaven. I'm being persecuted and killed like Jesus. This is what I want to pursue. The joys of martyrdom. Now there's a sticky one. Yeah, exactly. Like, if psychophysical harmony is true, then either it's good to pursue your own death for a goal, or it's bad and you're acting disharmoniously to pursue your own death to achieve a goal. Which is it? Which of these things are psychophysical harmony for the apostles like Peter, Paul, or Stephen? I really do need to know. I hope Capturing Christianity really compares his argument to his fucking scriptures. But you know what? Not going to do it. And I pointed this out in a different stream before this, is that there are many times in the New Testament that if you take Paul at his word, or the epistles at their words, that you are going to actively pursue disharmonious experiences where your actions, your moral valuations of what you ought to do are going to lead you to an experience that you would normatively not desire, right? Normatively, we want to be in community, to be in coherence, to have social cohesion with the people around us. But the New Testament dictates and extols that you are out of step with most of the world, that you lack social cohesion with most people. So which one of those experiences is actually harmonious or good? Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Is in Acts chapter 9, it says that Paul saw Jesus, but the others didn't. In Acts chapter 24, I think it says that everyone heard a sound. Paul heard it as a voice, but everyone else heard a sound. So yeah, which experience was the harmonious one? Who knows? Okay.
This is one kind of harmony that we call normative harmony, this kind of nice alignment between the normative role of experience and the descriptive role of experience. Certain experiences give us reason to perform certain behaviors, and sure enough, they're linked with patterns of behavior that are the very behaviors that the experience gives us reason to perform. Now, to see why that's at least prima facie puzzling, notice that given dualism, it didn't have to be that way. So remember, the dualist thinks that for any conceivable way
Yep.
of mapping
That's what I've been saying.
experiences onto physical states, there's some possible set of psychophysical laws that induces that very mapping. So in particular, there's going to be a possible world that's a kind of hedonic inversion scenario. So that basically inverts the descriptive roles of pleasure and pain. So
pleasure and pain. Fucking again.
In this world, when your body gets injured, you feel a pleasant experience. You feel pleasure, and you respond to that pleasant experience by withdrawing from the stimulus and
But let's talk about experiences of shame, disgust, compassion, and love. Let's talk about those. Could I create a brain state in someone that they would register or self-report as love, but the image on the screen is the opposite of what they'd expect, right? So I would put, like, Rebecca in this metal strainer, or um, on top of her head, connected to electrical interfaces for her brain, and I stimulate the psychophysical, harmonious experience of love, and I put, Pamela Anderson, spread eagle on the screen. Would he say that her reported experience is psychophysical harmony or disharmony? Dun dun dun! Argument dead.
and avoiding similar stimuli in the future. And when you eat like really sugary berries, then you feel
or I wire up Bread of Life or myself to a machine that can induce the experiences of intense shame, disgust, or pain. And I put Pamela Anderson on the screen, and lo and behold, all I can self-report is shame, disgust, and pain all at once. It seems to me that there's no moral agent, right, that is operating outside of the physical stimuli. So that would just prove dualism false.
intense pain. That is, you have an experience that you have reason to avoid, but your behavior doesn't match the normative role of the experience at all. You go on eating similar berries, you pursue similar berries in the future. So in this kind of hedonic inversion scenario, there's a radical misalignment between the normative role of experiences like pain and pleasure and their descriptive role. In this scenario,
So here we go again with pain and pleasure, and the idea of inversions. What if there's an amazingly nutritious fruit, vegetable, or meat, but it causes us extreme pain to eat it? I think the harmonious thing would be to continue eating it despite the pain experiences. Because we know at a chemical level or a studied level that eating that food will benefit our species. So we keep doing it. Conversely, we definitely know that most fast foods are not most of those things, right? They're not that nutritious. They're full of things that will further result us in future pain. And yet, lots of people still engage in the behavior of eating them and in trying to enjoy them, if not explicitly enjoying them. So if psychophysical harmony is true, then man, oh man, it's a mess.
Scenario, we're systematically pursuing an experience that we have reason to avoid, namely pain, and we're systematically avoiding an experience that we have reason to pursue, namely pleasure.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I I am completely with you. Physical or emotional. That distinction with this argument is never ever 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 made. Because once they have to try to do that, then they're going to run into what I brought up earlier with the ideas of shame, disgust, and compassion. Because there are certain brain states that I personally believe that you could instantiate in a person to generate shame, disgust, guilt, or compassion that, given their priors, they won't self-report them to be those same things.
Now, fortunately, our world is not like that. In our world, there's a nice harmonious alignment between the descriptive role of affective experience and its normative role, but that wasn't necessary. Now,
No, there isn't, because I guarantee you that you could induce the same physical stimuli to a brain, but due to the priors of that brain matter's experience, you're not going to produce the same self-reported results.
the hedonic inversion scenario is a particular.
Let alone if you removed certain relationships between sections of the brain, right? So if you remove the higher order decision-making functions of the brain, you would certainly be unable to produce the same psychophysical harmony of what actions ought to be taken because that person lacks impulse control.
Particularly vivid case of kind of normative disharmony, but there are other scenarios we could think about that involve kind of milder forms of normative disharmony. So consider a possible world where every physical state of your brain is mapped onto a slightly different TV static like experience or a slightly different shade of phenomenal gray or something like that. Okay, so these are normatively neutral experiences. They're experiences that aren't good or bad. They're experiences that we don't have reason to pursue and we also don't have reason to avoid. But given our kind of causal closure assumptions, under these alternative psychophysical mappings, our behaviors would have been exactly the same. Because remember, given the causal closure assumption, our behaviors are just caused by prior physical events. And the physical stuff is held fixed in this scenario. So behaviors are going to be the same. And so we're going to be constantly pursuing states that we have no objective reason to pursue, constantly avoiding states that we have no objective reason to avoid. And so we get a kind of milder form of normative disharmony. So
disharmony according to what? Right? Like, our sample size here is 1. I want a theist like Brian Cutter to give me a real existing comparison to say that these are the ones we ought not have, or that anyone else has a real tangible example to compare this to.
The initial puzzle is, look, in our world, the normative and descriptive roles of experience are very nicely aligned. That didn't have to be, it didn't have to be that way. And indeed, it seems like.
But are they? If the biblical account is true, then the majority of people who do not receive Jesus Christ as Lord are experiencing something that is disharmonious with their intended existence. So to say that the majority have harmonious experiences, if you are a Christian, you're wrong. You're wrong if you want to believe that your Bible is true. Because either A, God is correct in saying that most people have the wrong ideas about him or what he does and how he interacts with you, or he's right that most people have the wrong idea of what is right and how he interacts with you. Therefore, most people are experiencing psychophysical disharmony. And that's exactly what God describes and what he wants. I dare any Christian to disagree with me on this.
Like, under most alternative psychophysical mapping principles, you wouldn't have that kind of nice harmonious alignment between the normative and descriptive roles of experience. And so it seems to cry out for explanation. Like, why is it that experience has, why do we have this kind of psychophysical harmony in our world?
Evolution.
So I want to try to back up and give a kind of overview of what was just said for those of you that are having a little bit of difficulty following along. So there was 2 things that Brian did at the beginning of this explanation, which is he laid out 2 different assumptions that just help to make the problem clear, which one of those assumptions was dualism. The other one was the causal closure of the physical.
Yeah.
And once you combine those 2, you can kind of
see, Michael, I completely agree. And I think under the biblical or Judeo-Christian or Christian worldview, that embodiment for agency or decision-making is completely redundant. But most people don't slow down long enough to think about that. To think about how if their ideas of Revelation chapter 20 and 21 are true, then it's perfectly acceptable for God to initiate a state of existence in which our moral character cannot act apart from his love and goodwill, and that we're all perfectly fine with that. Right? This whole exercise in humanity in 2,000 years of history is redundant. It's garbage. It's extra steps to throw away in the end game. Or at least if we take God at his infallible word on the situation.
To see that like the subjective experiences that we have, like our minds, whatever, they don't have like the what do you use the psychophysical laws. I'll just use the same language, or the mind matter laws, if you want to put it that way. Yeah, the mind matter laws. If you accept dualism, then what that entails is that there are all these different kind of psychophysical laws that could have obtained. So like one example that he gave was what's called philosophical zombies, or like P zombies, where all of the physical facts are the same. So like your brain, your neurons and everything are still firing, and behavior's all the same and all that, but you don't have any actual subjective experiences. These are sort of mindless zombies that are walking.
What about P angels? Do theists sit around wondering, what if I was a P angel? I was just always this moral agent that didn't have to deal with a body interface. Like, what do Christians who watch Capturing Christianity think angels and demons were in relationship to God? Especially before they obeyed or disobeyed him, right? To create hell and all that other monkey nut stuff. Like, do they think that angels had some kind of like embodiment form that we wouldn't in our universe or in our experience categorize as physical? Or would they say something like, well, it's a spiritual essence, but it has an agency and blah, 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 blah. I think most people who watch Cam's channel are subscribed to him and his Patreon account don't think about how this argument interfaces with their actual beliefs and their understandings of the supernatural, angels, demons, heaven, blah, blah, blah. Because once they start doing that, they're going to realize very quickly that this is probably one of the worst and most frustrating arguments to pair with the particulars of Christian theism, because it makes God into this being who cannot or will not instantiate a world that does not require obfuscation, misinterpretation, random feelings of shame, disgust, guilt, and unbelief. Because that is what is psychophysically determined by what he designed. And how does this relate to the fall of man? I saw that Fenton commented earlier. How does this relate to the fall of man? It relates in a couple of ways. If psychophysical harmony is true, that particular neurological states map onto moral or experiences that are worthy or unworthy of judgment, or are experiences that correlate to righteousness or sin, how is it that God judges the descendants of Adam and Eve differently than Adam and Eve themselves? If psychophysical harmony is true, then God either selected for the attributes of human psyche or attributes of our bodily interface to fail to ascertain his grace, his love, whatever it is, or he didn't. Right? The fall of man is just some arbitrary removal of some random ability. And I think a lot of Christians don't want to adopt either view, that God would intentionally design what he would later define as sin, or that he just rolled the dice and said, fuck it. Now they are stuck with whatever. I don't care. No, of course not. That's how this ties into the fall of man. So if we have to say that brain states have some correlative relationship to sin or disobedience to God, who's really responsible for that then? Is it God? Is it man themselves? Well, if it's man themselves, then God really was never in control in the first place. So there you go. That's why I think this argument needs to get right the fuck off of all of apologetics channels. Because if it's completely true that psychophysical harmony is a thing, but sin, or let's say epiphenomenal desires to act out of accordance to God's will, are true, then God designed sin. Do you really want your eternal parent to design in you the desire to hate him, to disobey him, to do what makes him sad on purpose? Or do you want psychophysical harmony to be false? That your character or God's nature are both independent of your brain states, of your lived experience. That God could always forgive you, that he could always love you no matter what you could have possibly done. I think that's a lot better. I think that's an amazing gift. I think that's an amazing belief to have, is that God or the creator created you in such a way that no matter how it manifests or what you experience, you are always loved. You never lack a good thing. Radical forgiveness is a slippery slope. Well, it very much is. But an omni God that has no needs, that is truly existent with aseity, doesn't need you to repent, doesn't need you to ask, just loves you. An omnibenevolent God would just love you irregardless of your behavior. No, because especially if they're omniscient, because they know exactly how you would have disobeyed anyway. So again, psychophysical harmony on the Christian worldview is either redundant or completely unjust, because God would have known that removing the ability to obey him completely, wholeheartedly through the fall would result in these kinds of neurological states or experiences. If he knew that beforehand, if he's omniscient, then he's responsible for sin. If he didn't, then you're an open theist, and most Christians think you're a heretic, and you're welcome here. Congrats, I love you. That is just me being mean. What are you being mean about? I haven't seen a mean comment yet in the chat. So yeah, we got through about 20 minutes of that Capturing Christianity stream. It only took us like, an An hour and 20 minutes. That's not the only options. What's the other option, Jamie? Do you want to come on and say so? What the other option would be? So yeah, I hope I hope this was an enjoyable stream for most of you to listen to. I'm very grateful for the likes, comments, subscribes that I've gotten this past week. And yes, I did just do that YouTube short. The footage behind my animated character, by the way, is footage from the YouTube short my former church released to try and bait and switch people into their church and their youth summer camp. So there you go. Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate that. All right, I guess I'll let some people on before I give up the ghost and the host with the most who passes out the most, near the most. So there's the link. I put it in the chat. Let me pin it. Let me go back to my channel and pin it. I'm more than happy to have people on. Someone unsubbed from me from the stream. I don't care. Fuck 'em. There we go. Link is pinned. Anyone can click join and critique this argument or hang out with me and talk about whatever. So if Jesus... So is this question in relationship to the general topic of the stream of psychophysical harmony, or is this like just like a general theological question of what's recorded in the New Testament? Because like there's a mix there, right? Like so okay, if Jesus didn't go to heaven when he died, but down into the earth for 3 days, why did he say, "Into your hands I commit my spirit"? So let me think about this in terms of my former Christian interpretation. It maybe have been the idea of "into your hands I commit my spirit" is that the person in the narrative of the gospel accounts believed wholeheartedly that by dying, they were submitting to God's will, whether or not they would be immediately 3 days or 3 plus 40 days into their presence. So the idea here is that Jesus' spirit may have no experiences for that first 3 days at minimum, but that being would be willing and ready to submit to lacking those experiences to fulfill God's desires. So I don't think it's required for a Christian to believe that Jesus went to heaven when he died on the cross or hell. In fact, I think it could be additionally tenable to believe that a Christian to believe that Jesus experienced not a thing between his crucifixion and resurrection. But if he did experience things between his crucifixion and resurrection, I think you could try to make a biblical defense that the spiritually risen Christ went to Sheol to preach the gospel to those who were the faithful and had not seen uh, the fulfillment of the prophecies or their lives enacted. And so when Jesus does that, it releases them from their bondage in Sheol and brings them into right relationship with God. It's kind of like akin to like a soul sleep type of view that some Christians express. Um, what was the original question? Okay. Or into your hands I commit my spirit would be because, God is an eternal being dead for 3 days is just a mechanism to fulfill particular scriptural prophecies, but it's going to be the blink of an eye, an immaterial or inconsequential form of the experience for the Christ. And so he's more than happy and willing to give of his physical essence and being to fulfill those prophecies. So I think there's a number of escape hatches that a Bible believer has for passages like those that aren't necessarily directly related to psychophysical harmony, but definitely show or at least demonstrate that if the entirety of the gospel narratives are true. Oh, you know what? Yeah. Here's another reason why psychophysical harmony is actually completely garbage. If the hypostatic union is true, that Jesus is both God and man, all of his lived experiences were righteous, good, according to God. If that's the case, how is it that he had both a body that could sin but did not, and could experience all of the disharmonious states but did not? How is it that all of that occurred, but yet he chose not to obey them? And furthermore, as a man, right, relinquishing his own divine attributes, how would it be the case that now, if that were true, that having man nature still allowed you to surpass your psychophysical construction, then couldn't someone live a sinless life? Couldn't someone not need Jesus' sacrifice? I'm sure the Christians who listen to this later would not agree with that. So you've got like a two-horn dilemma. Either you accept that even the endowment of a man nature does not preclude you to sin, which is what all of us have. We all have a humankind nature, according to Christianity, and we are more likely to sin than be righteous, for sure. Or that shit don't exist, and we don't have to worry about it. All right. Well, it is getting later, and this is not going to be a narco nitty stream. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I look forward to many likes, comments, and maybe regaining that subscriber. Thank you guys so much for listening, hanging out with me. This argument from Psychophysical Harmony drives me absolutely bat nutty because of all the problems that occur when you try to interlock it with scripture. But, that's what we do here. All right. Good night, because that's nitty. Good night, y'all.